It was a strife of the Eight, housing 4 Imperium and many smaller kingdoms. The kingdoms were divided into 2 big alliances, with us sandwiched between the 2 mega Imperiums, 1302 and 1960. We rode out to face Camp Wind in the north, and after a 5 days long intense battle, we retreated back to our safe zone, waiting and preparing for the second part of this KvK. After our battle with Camp Wind, we got caged into our starting zone with no way out. Soon after the battle has ended, the passages to the next zones have opened, and all camps besides us and Camp Thunder have managed to advance into the inner circle. Our allies, Camp Fire, Earth and Midnight, took the zones in the north and west, while our opponents, Camp Wind, Greenwood and Daybreak, took the zones in the east and south. They still had no way to fight each other or to help us to break out, so we had to wait and prepare until the passages between the Zone 5s have finally opened. We spent the next days gathering resources, doing Bastion quests, collecting crystals, improving our tech, and getting ready for the fights ahead. By this time, my KvK tech was looking better. I reached the improved moral tech, so I could start to cause more damage to the enemy. In the meantime, we didn't want our opponents to get bored either, so we often cleared their AFK marches at their ruins and went out to kill their careless gatherers. In the first part of the KvK, I managed to get 395 million kill points and 2.1 million dead troops, the 2 stats I desperately wanted to improve. This was still far from my goal I had for this KvK, but I knew that I will have the chance to get more points in the upcoming fights. And 12 days later, the Drums of War chapter has finally arrived, and that meant that the past 6s around the map were going to be unsealed. Finally, our allies could join the fights. Since the map was divided into 2 parts, there were 2 passes where both sides could attack each other. The pass of Villa Villa in the northeast and the pass of Mocha in the southwest. In the northwest, it was Camp Earth against Camp Wind and Camp Greenwood. At the south pass, it was Camp Midnight and Camp Fire against Camp Daybreak and Camp Greenwood. It was time for thousands of players all across the map to come online and fight. Until now, it was just us trying to fight against 2 Imperium kingdoms. But finally, the moment has arrived when all camps could join the fights. The rallies for the passes have begun, with all sides trying to capture the structures to advance into the other zone. But it was our North allies, Camp Earth, that have managed to capture it first. Their soldiers were pouring through the pass, entering the zone we fought so hard for, and the 2 sides have finally clashed for the very first time. The fight was chaotic, and it was impossible to tell which troop belonged to which camp. But with them fighting, it also meant that it was our chance to attempt our prison break and help Camp Earth by pushing and pressuring our opponents from the south. So we marched out to face Camp Wind once again. But there were so many people fighting all across the map, and the fights were so intense that the lag was unbearable. It took my marches about 3 to 5 seconds to respond to my command, which made it impossible to make any real-time decision. Also made it impossible to reinforce flanks, but not only for us, the lag was the same for our opponents as well, so we managed to rally down and burn their defenses. The fights for the passes around the map continued even after the next day, with no real progress being made on any side of the map. In the southwest, 1 AVG and 60 GT were having a bloodbath, and in the northeast, Camp Earth and Camp Wind were still fighting for the pass of Villa Villa, and it was time to change our strategy to help our allies. At 18 UTC, we marched to the pass 6 and dropped the fort, but their swarms and the lag were too great, and they managed to tear it down before the fort could be finished. We burned a couple of their flags in front of our passes, but we were ultimately pushed back. After this, the fights for the passes have went on for many more days, but none of the camps have managed to gain an upper hand over their opponents. But it didn't matter anymore, because the opening of the last and final pass was approaching, and everyone has turned their attention to the final zone of the map. It was clear that everything will be decided in Kingsland. It was time to get ready for the final fights. I once again visited my Fruitopia, transferred all my resources from my farm accounts to my main, had a great time doing every verification pop-ups, defeated all my KvK Karuaks and Kahars, and finished every crystal research I could finish. We were ready for the final battle. And finally, 5 days later, the passes for Kingsland have opened, and all 6 camps that had access to the inner zones pushed their way in to start the final fight for the Great Ziggurat. Camp Greenwood and Camp Daybreak attacked from the south, Camp Wind came from the east, and our allies came from the west and north. The fights were intense and even. One AVG clashed with 60 GT in a truly epic battle in the west, and Duck and Song were fighting against Camp Earth in the north. And it was time for our prison break, this time for real. We rode out in the south and started our invasion of Zone Dimbokro. The goal was to divide the opponent's attention, cut them off from Kingsland, and to advance into our inner zones to help our allies. We had almost everyone online for this final, desperate push. Since they didn't guard the territory, we could spread out to block the teleport spots. We started to burn their flags, and we were making our way to their strategical points. But burning their forts and flags was taking a long time, hours and hours. Meanwhile, the battle in Kingsland was raging, and after a whole day of fighting, Camp Fire was slowly losing territory against Camp Greenwood. But while they were busy fighting, BG and CT managed to burn 60 GT flags close to the ziggurat. But in return, 60 GT was pushing up on the east side. Back in Zone 5, we managed to disconnect a chunk of the enemy territory, which allowed us to rally some of their cities and also give more space to spread our flags. But our advance caught the attention of the enemy. Many of their fighters have started to teleport back, and the fight to control the field has begun. Our hospitals were getting filled fast, but the fights were even, and we kept on burning their flags. It was a difficult terrain to fight at, with a narrow path between mountains. Both us and them murdered both up under our flags, and the back and forth rallies have begun. On their side, the rallies were being led by the 11.5 billion kill points Kraken, SR Jin, and our rallies and flag defense was being led by our 10.5 billion kill points champion, Insane Ooze. It was truly the clash of titans. Their rallies and swarms hit our flag hard, over and over again, and they managed to push our open field back and ended up destroying our garrisons and set our flags on fire. But it could not break our morale, it just made us more motivated. We were in the endgame now, there was no going back. It was once again time for the legend, the hero, the bearer of the pink yoga suit, our king, to become the most overpowered flag there is. Just like during the past 4 fights, he has teleported off territory and was ready to take the enemy rallies. And just like then, he had us all to reinforce him. Many rallies have landed on his city, but as always, it only gave us some really good reports. It was time to turn the tides. With the combined effort of both us, FcN and NB59, we started to repel their rallies and swarms on our flags. They kept on rallying and trying to take over the field, but being divided in 2 front lines worked in our favor. We have countered their field and rallied and swarmed down their flags. Our offensive was successful, and we destroyed their defensive lines and disconnected a massive portion of their territory. But as a response, Camp Greenwood has dropped 2 forts at their north passes. Spreading our opponent's attention seemed to be working well, as they were losing flags from the ziggurat. But in return, they started to focus on the west side of Kingsland, where the united forces of Camp Greenwood and Daybreak have managed to gain territory against Camp Fire. We kept on pushing on their flags and open field in Zone 5 and managed to cut our way through their disconnected territory. Knowing that we wouldn't reach the north pass before their forts are done building, we were headed to their other pass. We had to get to the next zone to help the Kingsland fights as soon as possible, and we were getting closer to their pass. Meanwhile in Kingsland, our allies started to gain territory at the ziggurat, but Camp Fire's flags were getting pushed out from the center, while Camp Wind was gaining the upper hand on the east side of the battlefield as well. They managed to destroy Camp Earth's flags and started to rally their pass. The fights were intense all over the map. No matter where you looked, you could see armies clashing. Nobody wanted to lose. Every camp was giving their all to win this KvK. And then the next day has come, and so did the final day of the fights. We were gaining more and more territories in Zone 5. We were on our way to their pass, which if we could take, we could potentially advance into the next zone and provide direct support to our allies. Meanwhile, our allies in Kingsland made a great comeback. They managed to push the enemy out from the center of the ziggurat and got back some territories on the eastern front as well, preventing Camp Wind from trying to take their pass. However, Camp Greenwood and Daybreak has advanced significantly on the west side of the battlefront. Our relentless advance has continued. We finally had a clear road to the northwest pass, and we started to move up to connect our flags to be able to capture it. But then, just minutes before we could reach our goal, it seemed like we have finally caught their full attention. Camp Greenwood has dropped the fort to barricade the pass and to block our way out. and their entire leadership and best warriors have teleported back to our zone to break us once and for all. But there was no going back, only forward. We were ready to fight, till all our soldiers were sent to Valhalla. Here we go. Their rallies and swarms hit our defenses hard, their archer rallies were deadly, and they didn't care what it cost to take down our garrisons. But we were also not afraid to lose troops. We kept on reinforcing and fighting them on the open field. We tried to push through their open field armies and burn their flags to make way to their building fort. But they kept sending more and more troops against us and pushed us back behind the mountain path, which gave them enough time to finish their fort. With this, they have achieved their objective, but they didn't go back to Kingsland just yet. They wanted to crush us. Camp Daybreak started an offensive against us in the south, and Camp Greenwood continued their unforgiving attacks against our flanks in the north. We were once again surrounded. Their attacks against our defenses went on for hours, but we were holding our ground. Our Jadwiga YSS garrison was doing good against their Henry Nebu rallies, and we managed to take down millions of their swarming and reinforcing troops. But soon after this, they moved their troops to the mountain path, where they managed to cut off our reinforcements, which proved to be a successful strategy to take down our garrisons. It was time to change strategies. We did a tactical retreat at the northern front, where they had the territorial advantage, and started to focus on the south, where we had it. We repelled Camp Daybreak's rallies and managed to launch a counteroffensive. Seeing that we won't retreat and that their objective was done here, the leadership of Camp Greenwood teleported back to Kingsland, where they could start their final offensive against our allies. While we were doing well in our zone, our allies were getting pressured in Kingsland. After taking over the entire south half of Kingsland, Camp Greenwood sent their armies to the eastern front to cut off our allies' flanks from the ziggurat with a united offensive. The situation was getting dire. We needed our allies to stay strong until we managed to break out from our prison. Seeing the enemy's advance, one AVG has repositioned their territory, built a new fort at the north side of Kingsland, and by the next day, together with Camp Earth, managed to push back the advance of the enemy and regain some territory on the eastern front. By this time, we were standing strong in Zone Dimbokro. We managed to push back Camp Daybreak, and we also built flags to their holy site, and we were burning their forts in front of their passes. By this time, I was quite skeptical about reaching my goal for this KvK, but I was ready to give my all to at least hit 2 billion overall kill points to reach the 30 million kill achievement for the coin. And then finally, we reached their south pass. Their Heron was about to open, and most importantly, their fort in front of their northern pass has been destroyed. We finally had a way out. But they were ready, and Camp Wind quickly dropped a new fort to block us once again. We had no choice but to hit it with everything we had left and try to destroy the fort before it was done building. Our attack has begun. We had to put up more field presence and burn their inactive flags before we could reach their fort. For this, we tried to cut off their reinforcements at the pass, so they wouldn't be able to hold the garrison during the siege. It was looking well, but then they regrouped and had more and more people teleporting in, and they charged at us. The final desperate fight has begun, and we had to give it our best to win. Camp Wind, Camp Greenwood, and Camp Daybreak were all pressuring us from 3 sides. We were burning through our healing speed-ups, burning through resources, and we were gaining kill points. They managed to push us down to this narrow passage, but we regrouped and pushed them back. We had to keep trying to reach their fort. We couldn't let it end this way. Meanwhile, the battle for the Heron has begun, and our final push for their south pass was on its way too. This was our final effort. But then, the battle was lost. We couldn't stop our opponents to build this last fort. We couldn't take their Heron, and our opponents have encircled the Great Ziggurat and took over the final zone. The fight for Kingsland was over, and we never managed to break out from our cage. This KvK was truly the rise of forts. But so what? Who cares about the KvK rewards? Who cares about winning? It was an awesome KvK. We really had a lot of fun. And that's all that matters. Yes, we had to spend a big part of it being caged into the same zone, but we still managed to find a way to have a good time. And for me, that is the reason why I play games, for the truly epic experience they provide, and for all the fun I can have with my friends. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in this KvK. I want to congratulate to the winners. Yes, the constant 4-drop was annoying, but their strategy, discipline, and impressive devotion to the game was truly out of this world. I'd like to dedicate this video to everyone who enjoys playing the game, and to the members of K77 for never forgetting to have fun in the game, no matter the situation we are in. You guys are truly the best. So now that the KvK was over, how did I manage to improve my stats? Let's get to the numbers. I started the KvK with 1.4 billion kill points, and I finished it on 2 billion. Which means that in total, I managed to get 588.9 million kill points in this KvK, which was enough to get the KvK coin for the 30 million kill achievement, but was not enough to reach my goal I had for the KvK. Altogether, the 588 million kill points consisted 26.5 million T5 kills, 5.7 million T4 kills, 1,400 T3 kills, 51.9 thousand T2 kills, and 324.9 thousand T1 kills. Besides killing all these troops, I also managed to get 2.9 million dead soldiers, which consisted 1,175,000 T5 infantry, 1,434,000 T5 cavalry, 285 million T5 archers, 69,000 T4 cavalry, and 525 T4 archers, increasing the total amount of dead troops I had from 9.4 to 12.4 million, and decreasing my overall power from 115.4 million to 87.2 million power, which, after getting back half of my dead troops at the end of the KvK, went back to 102.8 million power. Fun times. With this amount of kill points and dead troops, I became the 7th best warrior in my kingdom for this KvK. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would like to know more about my future video plans, upload schedule, or just want to be part of the community, don't be shy to join our Discord server. Thank you for watching. Here are your well-deserved fruits. Fruity out. See you in the next video. Maybe.